Pledge of Allegiance?
I'd be happy to.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Today's roll call. Cease.
Present.
Butts informed me that he had to go to Anchorage today.
Thank you.
Baclan.
Present.
Kreitz is informed that she can get out of work. McClure.
Here.
Osenga called right before, just short time ago, and said he couldn't get out of work. And Mayor Terry,
Present.
you have a quorum.
Thank you. And I might just state for the public, one of the reasons that we have this on YouTube and other forms of electronic recording is those council members will go back, watch the interviews themselves, get informed, and then they'll be able to review these interviews at a later date to help make the decision. So, Madam Clerk, are there any citizen comments?
No, ma'am.
No citizen comments?
No citizen comments.
And it looks like no one's here to present citizen comments. Is there anyone present that would like to? So we are done with item 4. Now we're on to item 5, approval of the agenda, consent agenda. Do I have a motion and a second?
I move for the approval of the agenda and the consent agenda.
A second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Excuse me. Hearing and seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you please call for approval of the agenda?
Voting on today's agenda. Cease.
Yes.
Baclan.
Yes.
McClure.
Yes.
Mayor Terry.
Yes.
Your agenda is approved. There are no consent items.
Thank you. So next on the agenda is new business items. Other new business items, we're conducting the interviews with the city attorney firm candidates. So I haven't done this before. I think Vice Mayor McClure has, Councilmember Cease potentially has, and Councilmember Baclan has not. So I think we can, agree on a few things, or we have a few things to consider. So we have matching questions in front of us for the first two firms. Is everyone fine with asking those questions in a round-robin format?
Yes.
And then if there's follow-up questions, get my attention and I'll call on you. I know I have a couple questions that I want to just ask at the end to be consistent. And we need to remember that this is a job interview, so we can't go too far off. So if there's something substantive that you're asking, let's make a note of it so that we ask both attorney firms. The clerk wants us to know that we'll write down the impressions and the scores as we go through each questions. Our names are on this so we can go back and refer to it. And we, I think, can discuss what our plans are, scoring the interview results in public, which would be June 22nd potentially, and then having an executive session that night following to discuss negotiation strategy and potentially direct the city manager to negotiate a contract. So with that, we'll go ahead, we're going to do the two, just for the public that's watching, we're going to start this interview. There's going to be a 10 to 15 minute presentation, then we'll do our questions, and then when that's completed, we're going to recess, and then we won't start the second part until, the second firm interviews until 1 o'clock. So you can, you don't have to stand by whatever electronics, whether it's radio, Facebook, or YouTube, what you're watching. You don't have to stand by waiting for us to start. We will start back up at 1 p.m. So with that, I think I've covered everything, and I will turn it over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor Terry, Vice Mayor McClure, Manager Meseros, council members, Clerk Blue. My name is Brooks Chandler. I'm a partner in the law firm of Lloyd, Chandler, Faulkner, and Munson. Thank you for inviting me to talk to you this morning, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about myself, a little bit about our proposal, and then take questions from you. In September of 1977, Labor Day weekend, I walked off a jet in Nome, Alaska to take my first job in Alaska, which was washing dishes at the Nugget Inn. The next time I walked off a jet in Nome was in January of 1984, and I was there to help an older attorney represent the city of Nome in a land dispute with a local gold company. In between, I had worked quite a few jobs in Alaska, and then took 5 years to go through law school at night classes in Washington, D.C. But I found pretty quickly that I really enjoyed the municipal law work and liked representing small cities. I decided that I would try to make a business focus on representing Alaska communities that didn't really need a full-time in-house legal attorney. That required me to leave the job that I had at the time, which was in a branch office of a large Seattle law firm, and join up with two partners, Bob Hicks and Brian Boyd, and start our firm in 1986. And it's really with some sense of accomplishment that I talk to you today as the city attorney for over a dozen Alaska communities, including Kodiak, Unalaska, Nome, remains a client, Soldotna, Galena, Dillingham. It's been very satisfying for me to see my plan work, and I think all of those clients, they didn't happen by luck. Nobody gifted them to me, and none of them have to retain our firm as attorney. The contracts always provide that the client can dismiss the attorney whenever they want. And so it's also quite satisfying to talk to you today as the longest tenured city attorney in the 118-year history of the city of Nome, the longest tenured city attorney in the 78-year history of the city of Unalaska, and the longest tenured city attorney in the 56-year history of the city of Dillingham. Communities do not continue to trust you to give legal advice and represent them if they don't think you're giving them excellent service for a fair price. And that's really, I think, why we have had longevity with these communities. We're very good at what we do, and we charge a fair price for our services. So with that as background, I'll talk a little bit about our response to your request for proposal. I'm going to start kind of with a big picture and then get into a little more details. I think there are three main roles that the city attorney fulfills in a community. One is to help elected officials implement the goals and policies that you have decided are in the best interests of the people that live here. That may take the form of assisting in getting the capital project from point A to point Z. It may be, or at least lately, it's been wrestling with extremely challenging issues about regulating individual behavior in the time of a pandemic. But the elected officials make the policies, set the goals. The attorney helps achieve them. A second role of the city attorney is to advise on and mitigate, hopefully, the risks that are associated with day-to-day operation of a multifaceted municipal government. That may include things like personnel law. It certainly includes careful preparing of contracts and agreements for buying and selling property, things of that nature. And also protecting the treasury either through appropriate collection of money that's owed or through defending the treasury against people that want to take money from it. And the third thing, perhaps the most important thing, the role the city attorney fills is helping make your local government work the way it's supposed to work under the laws of the state of Alaska. And this includes things like good advice on Open Meetings Act issues, public records issues, conflict of interest issues, and also personnel issues, because the people that provide the services to the members of the community are probably the most important part of the government. And those are the three, what I view as the main roles that the city attorney fills. So with that, I'm going to turn a little bit to the more details of our proposal. I'm going to start with who it is that would do the work, and that is the person you're looking at or listening to, as the case may be. This is a new client. I'm committed to do 85 to 90% of the work assignments that come in. I think at least for, if this is a one-year contract or whether it's a three-year contract, at least for the initial year, I think it's very important that I, as an owner of the firm, get a really thorough understanding of what the needs and desires are of the elected officials and management for legal services before I start parceling out work to other attorneys in the firm. I'll be assisted primarily by my partner, Patrick Munson, and his focus of practice is in labor and employment law as much as anything, and so there will definitely be some employment issues that come up that I'll ask him to help, not all, but certainly some of them. We do have a couple of younger attorneys in the firm, and there very well could be assignments that come in that I feel is appropriate to ask them to help on. They bill at an hourly rate. There can be some economies there that are achieved for the city, but that will be done with advance permission, advance notice and permission of the manager. The manager will make the call on that. In terms of how we go about doing the work that we do, my preference is that assignments would be routed to us either through the city manager or through the city clerk for work that she needs to be done, or through the mayor if there's some inquiries from council that for whatever reason don't seem appropriate to funnel through the city manager. I think this is preferable to a system where you have department heads that directly are assigning work, primarily because of budget control, number one, and prioritization. I mean, everyone's project is always the most important thing for them, but somebody needs to kind of make the call on what's the most important priorities for the city to get done, legally speaking. So that's how we would do the work. What are we proposing to charge? We quoted hourly rates, and they're in front of you in our proposal. Those rates are discounted from what we charge commercial and private clients on business type matters that we handle for them. We also responded to a request for a flat rate proposal, and our response there was to give you a range of $5,000 to $7,000 a month. I didn't feel comfortable doing anything more specific than that because I thought if there's interest in a flat fee arrangement, I wanted to discuss with the manager and with the council what is the kind of the category of work that would be included in a flat fee and come up with something that is more precise.
Yeah.
And I'm perfectly willing to do that. It would be something a little bit different from our firm, but I've talked about it with our partners, and I feel pretty comfortable I'd be able to do that. The range I didn't find was that hard to come up with because of a couple of reasons. One, obviously, I looked at the budget, which was at $75,000 last year. I'm not sure if you'll be able to sustain that for FY 2021 or not. But secondly, I just looked at, what do the communities we represent that have between 2,000 and 3,000 people, 88 employees, what have they been paying us over the years, year after year after year after year? You feel relatively comfortable as to what would the ordinary range of legal expenses be. So I feel fairly comfortable in the fixed fee quote we provided. We did take a look at your existing legal contract and thought about it, but frankly, I don't like that system. I think a sliding hourly fee, it didn't make sense to me as a private businessman to propose it. My feeling was an hour of my time is worth the same at the beginning of the month as it is at the end of the month. And the legal issues we deal with don't compartmentalize themselves into certain weeks or periods of a month. And And I just didn't think it, I mean, maybe it's worked well for you, but I just didn't think, I thought just a pure flat fee would be a way better way to go if we could reach agreement on what the scope of the work was. So that's why we didn't propose that. That may be not what you want to hear, and if so, no hard feelings. It's fine, but if you don't want to, if you think that is a system that you should continue. I still really like what I do. I enjoy it. It might be somewhat trite, but I mean, this is more than a job for me. I think local government is probably the purest and best form of democracy we've got going in the United States right now. And I like working with people that are willing to volunteer hundreds of hours to help out the folks that live in their town. I like working with managers, planners, clerks, public works directors. Almost universally, these are people that genuinely care about where they live and they're trying to make it better, and the work is satisfying to me. I like working with things that don't involve money, that somehow seem more important than money. And I've basically dedicated my professional career to doing this, helping make local government work, and both myself and the other attorneys in my firm would be very appreciative of getting the opportunity to do that for the people of Seward. So I'm happy to take questions now.
Great, wonderful, thank you. That was a great lead-in.
Yes.
Councilmember Paquan, why don't we start with you, and then we'll travel this way and then go around. Does that sound okay?
Sure.
Okay.
I'd like to say thank you again for coming as well. And a beautiful day to be here in Seward, so
Yes.
welcome. Describe your understanding of who you work for in relationship to the city's manager-council form of government.
Well, thanks for the question. I work for the people of Seward, believe it or not. Not individually, of course, but collectively. That's who I'm working for. I'm trying to act in their best interests. They have selected you, elected officials, to make decisions, and so I respect that fact that you're the representatives of the citizens, and so I also work for the city council as a group, just trying to get to you to where you want to go, not individually. I am not the attorney for the mayor. I am not the attorney for any one member of the council. And I am not the attorney for the manager. Now, the manager is certainly part of who I work for. Under your charter, he's supposed to coordinate the efforts of the city attorney, and it's really a team thing. It's not like I'm working for him. It's like we're both working together to do what the council wants, and ultimately we're working together for the best interests of the attorney. Now, with your setup, I also work a little bit for the clerk, because the clerk's independent, but it's the same concept. We're part of a team trying to achieve common goal.
Okay, and thank you for coming. How would you deal with differing, perhaps conflicting policy positions among council members and/or other city officials?
Well, it's not my job to set policy, so frankly, I would just wait to see who had the most votes. But I don't take sides, of course. I mean, I give advice, the best advice that people might have. So there's pro and cons to most every policy decision, and you certainly can have situations where the manager or other members of the staff are advocating for one thing and the council thinks that another result should occur. Depending on how an issue is presented, I mean, I might be asked to present just the pro of a side by management, but then respond to questions from the council that are thinking it's not such a good idea. And what I really try to do in these situations is just give everybody the result of my best legal thinking and explanation of the legal aspects of it. I suppose the most recent example that I've been involved with directly, just in the last couple of months, is this whole thing. I'm wearing a face mask. Well, I participated in some very passionate public discussions about, should the government require this, or should it be a recommendation? And, it's not, and my only role was to say, it's legal. I mean, we've had Supreme Court cases that justified making people wear seatbelts, and, but it wasn't my role to say, oh, you should do it or you shouldn't do it. My only role was to say, you can do it, but maybe you're going to need exceptions for certain, people with disabilities, various things like that, the legal aspects of it. So that's kind of how I see that work.
Very good, thank you. What do you think are some of the challenges you may face here? And then the second part of that question is, why do you want to be Seward's attorney?
Well, I want to be the attorney because it's what I do.
Yeah.
I think I explained that, so I'm not going to say anything more about it. The challenges here, well, we do a little homework before we come here to talk with you. This is a community that has had some strife within the last couple of years, and some of that has been not directly involve the attorney, but the attorney has to navigate it. So the way I do that, I mean, it certainly won't be the first time I've been in a community that's been in that situation, is my primary objective is, one, treat everybody I'm dealing with respect. They may sound like they're some kind of crazy lunatic when they're ranting and raving, but they're a human being. They're part of the people that live here. So that's one. Number two is see if there's ways to de-escalate conflict. Sometimes it's unavoidable. And number three, I think, is again just to give solid advice so people understand what the decision is. This comes up fairly often with either people saying there's a conflict of interest between this person and that person, or I should be able to get this information, and then maybe somebody doesn't want to give the information, and my role in it always is, number one, of course, to give the correct answer, but number two, to provide an explanation that people, even if they don't agree with it, they understand it. So, and to do that in a way that uses, I guess, more common sense English than legal mumbo jumbo. So yeah, and I think there's some ongoing personnel issues, but of course nobody lays that all out in public. So I got the sense that there might be. So I expect that as part of a challenge. And there's a project with the railroad that may be controversial. Maybe that's going to be a challenge. Maybe not. Maybe it's not controversial, but I've worked with the railroad before, and so I'm kind of expecting that. And the other thing is, you've got a severe economic challenge. So first, that's going to directly impact what I do, because you're going to have to spend less money on lawyers. You're going to have to spend less money on a lot of things. And that's going to make me need to work, as efficiently as possible, I think. And I think, so those are kind of some of the challenges. There's going to be some personnel, there's going to be some conflict, and there's going to be some pretty significant financial challenges for the city of Seward.
No, I think you've correctly identified some things. Thanks for doing some homework on that. Cheryl?
Okay. I'm glad you're here. Describe a time when you faced a professional, ethical dilemma, and describe what you did about it.
like that question. I had one that really bothered me, and trying to think how much detail I can get into. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit vaguely about it, okay? But just to give you the idea of how I handled it. Okay, it involved a department head that pretty clearly had, or not a department head, but actually, it involved a city employee who had pretty clearly lied under oath. And, you know, we have ethical obligations as attorneys, which is, you know, part of this is, you know, you're supposed to act in the best interest of your client, which means, you know, am I going to go running to the newspaper? You know, no, because that would violate my ethical obligation to the client. I also have an ethical obligation to the court, and an ethical obligation to kind of the system of justice. Luckily for me, the Bar Association has kind of given a little bit of guidance on what an attorney should do in this situation. You know, business attorneys run into the same thing. And so I did what I was, under the Bar Association ethics rules, I reported what I knew and what my concerns were to the manager. And I felt I had satisfied all contours of my ethical obligation.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was really thinking about that one. Me too. If you learn of an illegal act and/or compromising act committed by the city manager, a member of the city council, or the city clerk, how would you handle it? And I feel like that was a repeat of the last question, so
Yeah.
do you want to?
So what would be interesting with this question is, you know, in that case, which I think rightly so, it was an employee, so you reported it to his supervisor, basically.
Right.
So if there was an act with one of at the supervisory level, how would you handle that? There's an ethical question, like with the compromising act, whether if it's illegal with the city manager, clerk, or someone on council, what would be your step at that
Well,
point?
the manager or the clerk is relatively straightforward because you are their supervisor.
Yeah.
And so I would tend to want to report that to the mayor if I felt obligated to do it. I mean, I'd go through this whole analysis because there's, you know, when you say unethical, I mean, there's a range, okay? You know, at some point, it's not like every little thing am I going to go running to the mayor, but I mean, it's going to be, if I feel like, hey, this is bad, you know, really bad, then I would be contacting the mayor initially. And then if the mayor wanted to just sit on it, I'd be faced with another struggle about, well, okay, then, you know, maybe I need to tell the entire council because the mayor hasn't passed it along. I'm not, you know, again, it would kind of depend on the specifics, but that very well could be what I decide has to be done ethically because, you know, you do not have a strong mayor system here, and so in some respects the mayor is equal to every council member, and it's important, really, and this goes beyond the ethical issue. It's kind of important as to how I approach the work I do, that if one member of the council is given information from me, it really should go to everybody. So now the council member issue, the council is to a large degree responsible to regulate their own behavior. Now, you know, illegality again can have many forms, and so it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all issue. But generally speaking, it would be if it's something I'm uniquely aware of, or if it's something that uniquely bothers me that apparently doesn't bother anybody else, or that I felt compelled to do something about, I would start with the mayor again, you know.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. What do you feel are the most pressing legal issues facing Alaskan municipalities?
Well, I honestly can't say there's some pressing, legal issue. I think it's entirely a financial issue. That's the most pressing, issue for Alaskan municipalities. In terms of the immediate issues that people that we represent are dealing with, and I'm sure you're having to figure this out too, is how is the federal funding that came to you through the state going to be distributed in your community? Again, that's not, there's parts of that are legal because the Treasury Department seems intent on confusing everybody about what can and can't be done with the money. But a lot of it is not legal. It's, what do we think is the best use of for this money in our town? And so it becomes legal in that first sense. When I said, what's a city attorney do? It's like, hey, we implement what you've decided to do. So as you make a decision about that, it will kind of be legal because we will want to make sure you have a framework that meets the Treasury regulations such as they are and, reflects what you really want to do, that doesn't have like some weird loophole where Xerox Corporation can come in and get 10 grand from the city of Seward.
Right.
That type of thing.
Yeah. I was just on a phone call with AML today, and that's just absorbing all the bandwidth is the CARES Act and distributing those funds, so. Exactly.
Yeah, that's no question that's
Yeah.
happening all over the state.
Next question. Some department heads are contacting you with complaints about another department head, the clerk, or the manager. What would you do?
Well, if it's a complaint about another department head, my job is to inform the manager. And the manager can decide how much legal time should be devoted to it, because a lot of times these conflicts are, they're not legal. They're like, how do you run a city? And it's more dealing with conflict between employees. I can make suggestions, but I don't really have to have a lot of involvement with it. But I think it's important, the manager needs to be aware of these things. And to the extent, for whatever reason, this does happen, is people don't feel comfortable, somehow it comes to the attorney instead of to the manager. And so I tell the manager, but I also tell the person that if somebody's complaining to me, I said, this is the wrong guy.
Yeah.
You need to talk to the manager. So conflict between the manager and department heads depends on, exactly what the nature is. I hate to keep saying that, but I've had situations where it was a sexual harassment situation. You deal with that quite differently than, the manager did something that I don't agree with. So, but in general, it's to make sure that the manager knows that there is a conflict situation, to make sure the department head knows that whether the grievance policy does or doesn't apply to department heads. And so sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. I'm not sure how yours works. But there can be, and often is, a grievance policy, and direct employees to use that, because that's designed to resolve these things in some fashion. And in fact, I think in your system, it might end up in front of the council as a personnel board type of thing. So that's the role in those situations.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Six.
How would you handle a client that's insisting on moving forward with an issue that is fraud? Fraud with legal risk?
Well, I make sure that the legal risks are explained and understood. After that, the decision as to whether the risk is appropriate to take is for the client to make. And once they make the decision, we work as hard as we can to achieve the best outcome.
Great, thank you. Just when you're ready, Councilmember Bucklaw, I'm writing also, so just when you're.
We have 2 candidates. What specific skill do you bring to the position that would single you out from the crowd?
Well, you're not going to make a wrong choice, and you're not going to get me to say I'm better than the other candidate. I mean, I'm offering you, I'm trying to give you information about me and our firm, but I'm not comparing myself to the other firm.
Very good, sir.
Thank you.
Vice
Okay,
Mayor?
this is a bit longer. The city manager and city department heads, when authorized by the manager, routinely consult with legal counsel and sometimes need a quick response to a question. How do you perceive the method of contact with you, and in what amount of time can we expect an initial response to a question?
Well, questions that are needed responses right away, there's 2 ways. There's email and there's a phone. People tend not to use the phone these days, but I'll just tell you, my feeling is if it's really important, somebody calls me. I mean, if it's that important. Because the idea that I sit in front of my computer watching for an email to pop up when I'm working on a 30-page brief, that's not how I work, really. But, people, I mean, it's not like I ignore my emails. It's just like, sometimes you got to get this done. So
Yeah.
if it's an emergency thing, it really should come over the phone. The other thing that I appreciate is when clients let me know the deadline in the email communication, which doesn't always happen, but it's kind of a common sense thing. And frankly, we're a service business, so we meet the needs of the client. And if they need an answer right away, we find a way to drop everything and get an answer right away. I hope oftentimes, just because I've been doing this for so long, that I actually can just answer things on the phone.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we approach it. But we really, if somebody says they need an answer right away, that we do our darnest to meet their needs.
Great, thank you. So the next one, you've done a great job. I really liked your explanation about, why you didn't feel comfortable giving a fixed monthly rate. That was very helpful to hear. And so this question talks about your expenses, which the first part is about the monthly fixed rate, which you've already done a good job. But the second part of this is, how do expenses such as travel, hotels, incidentals, it does say legal consulting time being billed, but you've already talked about that. So kind of how do you bill the peripherals?
The routine expenses we bill at cost, although we don't, photocopies is an exception. I mean, this is minor stuff, but
Yeah.
so much per copy.
Yeah.
The travel time, I think I mentioned,
It
but I'll
might be in
repeat
there.
it.
It's in there.
I don't bill for travel time unless somehow I'm actually doing work, while I'm traveling. That won't happen in a car, but it does happen for clients that I fly to. You actually sometimes can do work. And I have not traditionally billed for time when I'm sitting at a meeting waiting to give an attorney report. Because I'm not, what am I doing for you? And it's relatively easy to say that to a client, when you go out once a year, because, it's so expensive to get there. I've thought about it in connection with Seward, because Seward has a tradition of having the attorney come, once a month. And I'm willing to do that for you for at least for a year to see how it goes, if you want to have the attorney continue to come here for a month. So, there is value to it, to hear, you get, face-to-face time is valuable, but it doesn't necessarily have the full value of me doing legal work for you. So, hotels, all those other things, whatever we get charged, we pass on to the client. So certainly if I'm coming down here for evening meetings in the winter, I'm probably going to stay overnight and drive back home in the daylight. So I'd probably want you to cover the hotel.
Great, thank you very much. So that was the end of our organized questions. I'll let council go first if there's any additional questions, or unless you want me to jump in with mine first and then, okay, I'll start. So I have two questions. One has to do with our harbor. We do a lot of leases, and then also we do a lot of, well, I won't say a lot of liens and impounds, but when we do our liens and impounds, like that's pretty specific, legal guidelines, obviously, that have to be followed. How familiar and how many communities do you do leases for in those liens and impounds?
We do them for Nome. We've done them for Kodiak. We have done, in terms of leases of property at the harbor and things like that, we've certainly done that for Dillingham and for Unalaska as well. They have a relationship with the United States Coast Guard and some fuel companies that do things on the dock, and of course we've done some fairly complex agreements with the ocean-going carriers, Maersk and Sealand, about using the facility in Unalaska for the container cargo.
Okay.
We've certainly done the standard, slip agreements, but we probably don't need much work in that. So the derelict vessels is always a challenge because, what do you do with this thing once you grab it? And how do you get paid for all the expense associated with it? But we've been through that exercise a number of times, so it wouldn't be anything new to us.
Great. Thank you very much. And then the second question I have, so the city's a union shop now, but maybe specific to electric department, like just labor negotiations. And what's your philosophy and kind of thought process about working with unions in general?
Well, my thought process is unions can be a positive influence in that they speak on behalf of a number of employees, which can be easier than dealing with a group of people on a one-by-one basis. And so we don't have any inbuilt antagonism to working with unions. Unions have a job to do. They are supposed to advocate for their members, and so we expect that to happen, and we expect there to be back and forth during a collective bargaining agreement negotiation process. One of the things we want to do in that process is make sure people have good information. Not trying to keep secrets about the economics of the employer, but to share that pretty openly with the union. In terms of individual grievances, it can be a little bit different because that tends to be more adversarial, and we're not necessarily trying to make a deal. you know, I mean, sometimes you can resolve them, but a lot of times they're not, and so it's, and the union has, you know, they have a job to do. They need to represent their members. We need to represent the interests of management, and that tends to be not as friendly, so to speak, as a collective bargaining agreement. But I appreciate the fact that unions have a job. You know, I understand and appreciate the fact they have a job, and we've worked with quite a few of them over the years, and don't have, you know, we haven't burned any bridges behind us, so that like the business rep's gonna say, oh my God, Chandler, I can't, you know, no, it's not gonna be like that.
Good, that's good news. Well, good, thank you. Are there any other questions? No? Great, well, again, I mean, I just can't say enough that we really appreciate your time. I don't know if you have any questions for us. Isn't that always the dig at the end of an
Hey,
interview?
so, well, I'm glad you asked that.
Well, let me tell you. Darn it.
And I came up with, I mean, I assume you do have this system of the manager funnels the assignments, even though if you read the charter, you know, he's not the supervisor, the attorney, but that's the system you use
You know,
now?
I meant to bring my protocol and procedure book, and I don't
Yeah,
think I
okay.
grabbed it.
So, and then my other question just had to do with the community health clinic. My wife was, at the pandemic, she was the RN at the Girdwood Health Clinic, and I do their legal work, which really isn't that much, but I noticed in your code, there was like a provision that said the city might offer the city attorney, you know, legal advice to the clinic, and I was wondering, do you actually do that, or do they?
We did do that, so now
Okay.
that they, when it was first reorganized, the city provided like all the benefits and all of the county.
Yeah.
But now that they're pretty independent, now they have their own legal counsel,
Okay,
their own finance.
all right.
So at this time we do. It's still in the code, so that could be, we're doing some codification work coming up, so that could be
Okay,
something that goes out.
got it.
Nice. Well, those were easy. I thought you were going to give us a zinger, so that speaks well. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, at this point, again, I think you heard me say that I think the process will be, we will bring this to our June 22nd meeting, have those, have the information at that meeting in the public, and then we'll go into executive session. So we will start negotiations sometimes after the 22nd. So we'll keep you updated, probably
Okay.
through the clerk on that for a timeline. So right.
That'll be good.
Yep, thank you. So right now at 11:47, I'm going to go ahead and recess until 1 o'clock. Thank you.
Great.